Okay. Hello and welcome to Anne and Steve Talk Stuff, where an artist and an economist walk into a podcast to talk about strange things that make the world go round. I am Anne Blake. I am the artist in question, theatre maker and musician. And Stephen, you are the economist, are you not?
I am Anne Blake. I am an economist. I am a professor at the University of Limerick, and I'm a writer for the Currency.news and also a part-time parental taxi driver. It seems I spend a truly enormous amount of my time, genuinely enormous amount of my time, driving my unreasonably good at sport children around to their various sports. Which, if you are what you frequently do, then I'm an emailing familial taxi driver.
I love it. I love it.
So yeah.
It's the curse of having, you want your kids to be active, but like the byproduct of that is you bringing them to those activities. So fair play.
Yeah. Look, it's part of life, and it's not a bad thing. By any means. We have a lot to talk about today,
Yes.
because you, Anne Blake, you have been on one of the flying things I see sometimes in the air.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what they're called. Tell me all about your experience on this magical machine.
Yes, I went to Berlin. I went to Berlin
On a plane, on a Zeppelin,
on a
blimp?
plane, on a very, very, very not fancy Ryanair flight. But it got me there. I ain't complaining, It brought me from one far out point of one airport to another far out point of another that involved a lot of walking, but I didn't care because it got me to Berlin, to a very dear friend of mine who's living over there. And we were chatting, and I suppose Berlin is one of these cities that has obviously had an unbelievable history with so much turmoil and incredible cultural output and everything. And anyway, he's living there, and he's a Clare man originally, but he said he listens to us. He says he listens to us by choice, not as my friend, but as a genuine listener. And he's lived in Limerick, and he was just fascinated for us to talk about a certain aspect of Limerick and how it in some ways is a city with just an embarrassment of riches and potential that it never quite seems to reach. And it, especially even after having a huge mad kind of, and we talked a year ago, I think, maybe a bit more, maybe close to a year and a half ago, about how the lockdown was an opportunity for a reset, and maybe to rethink the city centre and to rethink how it works. And that hasn't really happened. So, I mean, I did say to you off air, as an artist, I could go, oh, well, curses ain't Munchin, and that, the city, if you're from here, you'll never thrive, or, it's all these kind of old folklores, or the kind of the scarring of the broken treaty has broken the spirit of the city forever, and all this stuff. But I'm sure there's a lot of economic and political reasons why Limerick never quite is as cool as it could be.
Yeah, I mean, I guess so. One of the things is just to define what you mean by success, right? So I think if you compare us, it's not appropriate to compare us to Dublin, because we're not the capital city. We don't have the seat of government power. It's not where all the big industries are, and it's probably not fair to compare us to Cork, right? So like, if you look at other third cities around the place, around the world, you look at why they exist and what has happened to them. They're typically post-industrial cities, so they were set up to do a thing. In Limerick says we were a trading hub, based entirely on the fact that we were beside a big river, essentially. And most of the streets, and in fact the city's geography, is based on the idea of getting stuff off boats, yanking it into some kind of manufacturing place, and then redoing it and putting it back where it was. Even like the location of I'm actually hesitant to call it King John's Castle. The big ass castle in the area.
Actually, just a little aside, and we are going to talk about the location of it. Why? And I'm curious to know, why are you hesitant to call it King John's Castle?
Well, just because there's a big movement now to sort of like take this colonial privilege away from this. I mean, one of the first things you learn about King John's Castle is the lad never actually visited it. Do you know what I mean? Like it just feels silly, and it's like it's not his castle, it's our castle.
Mm.
You know, it's just called Limerick Castle and move on.
Well, you have
And
Dublin
so
Castle, you have
yeah,
Kerr Castle, you have Kilkenny Castle. Like, you don't have anyone, any other castle named after a British
yeah,
monarch.
or
Yeah.
just get it sponsored by some like deeply inappropriate multinational. You know what I mean? The Starbucks Castle,
Oh
get some
God,
dosh. You know,
no.
or no, what's it, like something completely awful, like my mind is like circling through like just dreadful options like the Slim Fast Castle. Do you know what I mean? Like just something just really
Um,
sponsored by Instagram, even worse again. You know what I mean?
Anne
It's
Blake,
yeah,
Anne Blake does not endorse this this proposal. Can I say?
yeah. Listeners, all three listeners should immediately take to Twitter and come up with different and awful, like wrong answers only kind of responses for like what the name of this thing should be. Actually be amazing. It would actually be amazing.
But it is the only it.
I know. The Leinster Rugby Castle. That would be the answer.
Oh
That'd be the
God,
answer. That's the worst. That's the
Stephen,
worst
you're
option.
Stephen, you're officially cancelled. That is
I could go all day. I'm cancelled, aren't
desperate.
I? It's over. I could go all day.
Well, oh no, but
Yeah.
you're right. Like, I mean, it's,
Uh,
it's Bunratty Castle. It's like no castle is called after a British monarch except for King John's. And as you said, he was never here. Anyway, the location of the castle.
yeah. So the location of the Starbucks trademark castle it's all based around trade, right? It's all based around trade flows and tolls,
Mhm.
getting money, extracting taxes, that kind of thing. Even down to the customs house, the courts, everything. It's all the geography of the city is based around its rationale. There's a
Mhm.
reason for being. This reason for being in the past has always been trade.
Mhm.
Take away that trade, what's the point of the city, right? And many cities around the world have this problem. The best example in that comes to mind right away is Bristol. So Bristol in the UK, exactly the same. You know, former trade port, obviously a former slave port, etc., etc. But what do you do when that dries up? When we move to super tankers, move to ports, and change the way that we do things? The answer is we don't know. So, what is the rationale for the city? The city's rationale for many years was it was the place where the shops were. And then in the 90s, there was a big change, and that big change was this move to big box stores. So if you look at the density of the city, so just literally the occupation of the city in terms of people in the previous five census polls, Limerick is the city center. The two city center areas are increasing in their population, meaning
Mhm.
the population density is increasing, right? And then in the 90s, it starts to decrease. And the reason it starts to decrease is people start wanting to live and being able to live outside of the city center. So Castle Troy, which is one area, just becomes filled with housing estates. Similarly, Raheen, similarly, Durdo. So we have this huge suburban sprawl, and that's all aided by the development of these big boxes, these big box retailers, which are themselves a function of the fact that there are roads, right? You can take the development of the University of Limerick as the same kind of idea. It's just basically a big flat thing that's moving out to the east, not to the west all the time. So faced with the sort of de-densification, so the people just leaving, what you see is a very interesting phenomenon. It happens all over the world. It's called the donut. And
Mhm.
not to be confused with the donut model, which is Kate Raworth's work. The donut is literally if you just do a graph of price changes, the price of property in the city center is falling, while the price in the ring around the city center is rising because people are moving from the city center out to the suburbs.
Mhm.
Um, there are many cities that have experienced this. New York in the 1970s, Manhattan, for example, in the 1970s, the punk era had this. Berlin itself in the 1970s and 80s had this. Typically associated with an artistic renaissance because the rent is so cheap, artists can pay for it. but it's also associated with massive increases in crime. And generally, a donut effect is something to be avoided for most people. So then the question again is, you have this giant urban sprawl, right? There's an argument based on population that the main street of Limerick is not in fact O'Connell Street. It is in fact the industrial corridor of the Plassey Technological Campus. So if you just look at just on a population density basis, that's where the most people are, and that's the main street of the city.
Right.
It's not even in the city, as most Limerick people would understand it. It's not even in the city. But you can make on a population basis, you can make that argument. So then the question is, okay, what do you do next, right? What do you do next? It's very simple. It's very simple. You have to allow rents to fall to the point that interesting things can happen within it. And you have to make a commitment to do something different, which implies densification, right? So if I can put it very simply, what we've chosen to do for the last 30, 40 years is go out. We've used roads and cars to go out and sprawl the city and its environs out. Lots of problems with that. Huge carbon footprint. It makes producing government services much more expensive. It ties people into two cars. It increases the cost of their daily living, and it's just generally bad. Densifying things, not like to skyscrapers, but to say the levels that you have in Paris or Madrid or even Berlin. So you've got like a 6-story building, right? Where and people live in those 6-story buildings, and they're quite nice spaces. Is entirely possible. The problem is people don't want to do it, and there are two reasons for this. The first is Irish people generally, if given the choice between living in an apartment and not, choose not. The second reason is it's much cheaper as a private property developer to build a housing estate on a greenfield or brownfield site than to build, a big 6-story nice apartment block that people want to live in. Like it's not a student accommodation, it's not a temporary accommodation, it's not a hotel. It's literally like, this is Stephen and his family's home. They will live here for the next 40 years. That kind of idea, which is the idea that you have in Paris, the idea that you have in London, the idea that you have in Madrid and indeed in Berlin. That is a different vision of a city center, because it's a city center that's walkable. It's a city center that's much more green. It's a city center where you have lots of the services around. It's also a very middle class version of the city. So the vision of the city that I've just described to you is like the middle of Paris, which is a very middle class place to be, right? So you have to understand that a lot of the time when you're talking about this stuff, you're always talking from a position of like, what would I, the middle class person, like to see in this situation? And it's like, well, that's not who the city's for. The city's for everybody. It's for the rich, the really, really rich people, right?
Yeah.
And it's for the poor, right? And the city is occupied by these multiple groups. It's for the artists, it's for the financiers, it's for the startups, it's for everyone. And I think one of the biggest problems that I would have with the city at the minute is that it doesn't have a coherent vision for what it wants to be.
Yeah.
And so you and what I mean by that is it doesn't tell you what it's going to say no to. So there's all hopey changey, I love this, I love that, we want the kids and the grannies and blah blah blah, mom and apple pie. Never mind all that. Tell me what you're against, right? So if you say I want the city to be entirely developed for cars and for small retailers, right? I want somebody to be able to drive up, buy something from my shop, get back into the car, drive off again. That's grand. If you say that's fine, that's the city that I as the mayor of Limerick want. It's a vision of a city as a transactional sort of car park with shops beside it, and occasionally I'll put up with some little sort of interruption to that, but that's essentially what I'm up for. That's grand. That's fine. And if you get elected on that basis, no bother to you. Fair play. I'm leaving, but okay, that's cool. Like that's fine. I wouldn't mind that. I really wouldn't mind that because it would give me a very strong signal. Like this is not the kind of place that I want to live in.
Yeah.
So tell me don't tell me what the hopey, changey, aspirationally, frankly, bollocks, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because the reality of the situation is what the source of funds controls. If there's a source of funds that says we are funding this, we are funding this, we're funding this through our rates, and we, as the people who pay the rates, determine the pattern of economic behavior in the city. Well, then that's just what's going to happen, and the rest of us, frankly, don't matter,
Yeah.
right? You're privileging a group who pay a tax, like a poll tax, yeah. And we know
Mm-hmm.
in the antebellum South that was a very, very, very bad idea. But if
Mm.
you're privileging one group against another, you're typically saying we are for that group and for the values that that group espouses. Now that, to be clear, is grand, absolutely grand, as long as you're willing to put the hand up for it and go, this is what we're for.
Yeah.
At the very least, that vision, while apparent to me personally, is at least a very clear statement of fact that says, we're going to do this, lads, get over it. Now, the other option is to say, we actually want to build up,
Mm-hmm.
okay? We want to build up. We want to build new things that are going to go up 6 stories
Mm-hmm.
minimum, and we're going to have shops in the basement, and it's going to be really high quality apartments that are going to include bits, the architecture of living. You know, there's going to be a childcare facility, there's going to be a gym, there's going to be all this kind of stuff built into this 6-story space. That means it's A, going to be expensive,
Mm-hmm.
B, we're going to knock some stuff down, right? Some stuff is going to get knocked down. Are you okay with that? Because we live, unfortunately, in what political scientists call a vetocracy. The vetocracy is simply that some person says no and nothing can happen,
Mm-hmm.
right? So if you just think about it, somebody says, oh, well, you couldn't possibly build something there because there's a snail. And the snail is a particular kind of snail. It's a nice snail. It's the only place we found this snail. So you
Mm.
got to leave that snail alone. Or there's a bat or a bee or a rabbit or something, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or this is a historical thing. Um, I know it's completely rotten and nobody wants to buy it and nobody can sell it and nobody can develop it, but it has to stay here for some unknown reason, right? So both of those arguments, by the way, are arguments that you will typically find. Like I've given you one caricature of an argument, which is like a pro-business one,
Mm.
but then now I'm giving the other side of that argument, which is like, no, you know, the city is perfect the way it is, and like as my mother says, will you stop? You know, will you stop? No, it's great, that building that nobody can live in, that there's a tree coming out of. We got to leave that there because reasons. And you're like, no, 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 no. Progress means densification. Densification means stuff gets knocked down. If that and that means that you have to wipe away the past.
But is
And
there
that's a really difficult thing,
not an
you
in
know?
between space as
Oh,
well?
I mean,
Like,
I am to be clear, giving you totally
oh, okay.
caricatures of an argument, right? To be
Yeah.
clear, they're both, but my point is, they're both very visions of the world that are
Mm.
diametrically opposed to one another, right? One is, it's grand the way it is. It works for us. We pay the taxes anyway, so have a glass and go fuck yourself. On the other
Mm.
side, it's like, well, no, we actually want to build this thing up. We want to densify. We want to make all these services work.
Mm.
That's a version like that like a lot of like right on people will, you know, the sort of people who tweet a lot about this stuff will get like, yeah, we love that. But then you go, well, if you want to put that in an area where there's already stuff, you got to knock some stuff down.
Mm.
Like you just have to. Like, there's
But
no kind of way around it. Like you got to take a jackhammer to that, and they go, oh, what about this bit of wood that's been there since, you know, I don't know, 1922? You're like, well, some of that's got to come down.
but
And
you
you
but you
have these, you know,
but throwing in just okay,
yeah.
something in between. Something in between. So you do have, I
Yeah,
mean, you go to all these amazing cities around the world that do maintain their heritage and do develop and have this old meets new thing. And
yeah.
like Limerick, okay, what's Limerick? Limerick is a Georgian city for the most part. And it has outside of Dublin, it's got the most Georgian blocks, and then I think it's Waterford or Derry or something like that, or
Mhm.
both. And then there's bits around in other cities. There's bits of Georgian buildings, but I mean Limerick is very like kind of identifiably this, and they are
Mm,
developable into something wonderful. And there are businesses, or there are people who own buildings, and
mm,
there are tax breaks if they don't do anything with the upper floors, like this
Mm,
thing in Greece where if you don't build your roof fully, you don't have to pay full taxes. So there's all these
mm,
disgusting half-built buildings in parts of Greece.
mm,
And that's when the taxes are like, oh, we're putting something like, should there not be a law saying if your building is derelict and left to rot, you are going to pay a huge fine on that.
yeah.
We're going to sort this out because dereliction, it's like a cancer. It just it kills. It just has a knock-on effect.
Oh
And
yeah.
like, I mean, yes, and I'm hearing your very extreme black and white caricatures, absolutely, but there are decisions that are that could be made, or simple kind of, as you say, taxations or pushes that doesn't favor leaving buildings to rot and living in some other country, or not developing the upper floors and just letting like we you know you can have apartments as well that are fine for maybe young professionals who will then move on somewhere else, but another bunch of
Mm,
young professionals will move in there. They mightn't be family homes, but they might be a great place to live for about 10 years, and then
yeah.
you might move somewhere else, but somebody else would be very happy to live there in their 20s or whatever,
Yeah, yeah,
like
sure.
that kind of in
Yeah.
between thing. And like I'll say, I'm someone, I live in the city, I do have a house and a garden, but I'm 5 minute walk for everything. I'm very lucky like that.
Mm,
But like, there, it does seem that, as you said, there is just this kind of head in the sand feeling sometimes about what'll we do? We'll just build another car park. Seems to be the the
well,
you know.
yeah. So you got to think, what's the investment equation, right?
Mm,
So it comes down to money, right? What's the investment equation? How much do I have to spend, and how much
mm,
will I make? The only body that doesn't have that in its mind is the city council, and it is utterly starved of resources. So it
mm,
has no money to basically go, ah, yeah, we're going to redevelop all these things. It's going to be great. Um, there's a thing called Limerick 2030, and its job is to basically take these big sites and redevelop them. But the vision of the 2030 group is kind of like, we're going to take this big site and we're going to turn it into something kind of like more officey, more, it has a specific economic function associated with it. So it solves the investment equation by saying, we, Limerick 2030, are going to borrow money from the European Investment Bank at like 1%, and we're going to rent this thing back out to other people and make like 2%, and then problem solved. A lot of people can't do that. A lot of little landlords and accidental landlords can't do it. We did a project about 5 years ago looking at a single Georgian block, and we just said, who owns this thing and what's their story? It was really interesting because if every time you see dereliction in Ireland, every time uh, there is a family story behind it.
mm,
And the family story is something like, the dad left the house to the three kids. The three kids hate each other. They are waiting for each other to die until they can get sole ownership of this building. Nobody's willing to put any money into it because they can't get any money because they're too old anyway. The dad died at 90, everyone's 65. The bank isn't going to give them any dosh, you know.
mm,
So like that's by the way, that's not a that's not a hyperbolic or even made up example. That's an exact example
mm,
of a real house, right? And you very much will see these elements taking place.
yeah.
So you find these family stories, and then you go, oh well, we should CPO them and tax them and stuff. When compulsory purchase order, the reality is that there's a very well tested law in the Constitution that says basically property is inviolable. So I can't have a pop at your property, and nor can you have a pop at mine. And if you try to CPO my property, I have to do reasonable things to it. So I can set the CPO clock back just by painting the front, like
Okay.
literally the ugliest color. You literally lash the paint out, the rotten paint I found in the back of the shed, throw it up there, that's done. Or change the windows, or change the front door. It doesn't change the occupancy levels. It doesn't change the fact that the city it continues to be empty. A much stronger property tax, site value tax, would be a very good thing, because all of a sudden people would see, well, look, I'm losing money now every year on this. And the three people who are waiting for each other to die, they would now be forced to talk to each other going, Jesus Christ, like this is just going to keep costing us money every year. We should do this. The probability of producing a city-wide site value tax is pretty low, but I would love to see it happen. By the way, another tax I would love to levy is a congestion tax. If you choose to drive into Limerick City, that's absolutely fine, no problem, but you're going to pay for it. Not pay for parking. I would have parking be free. Free parking everywhere, all the time, because that's what people do anyway.
Yeah.
Right? People park like in the front door of Brand Thomas. So free parking, but a congestion charge, and the congestion charge is a tenner. So you want to drive your car into Limerick City, no problem. Pay us a tenner every time you do it. And people go, oh, that's terrible, that's so sad, but I just want, no, you're going to drive in, you're going to put those e-flow things at the top on O'Connell Street. I guarantee you, it's worked in London, it's worked in Singapore, road pricing works everywhere it's tried. Remember the plastic bag tax? Remember the day before the plastic bag tax? Little old ladies were rolling apples in individual plastic bags before putting them away. The day after the plastic bag tax, they had these giant plastic yokes made of hemp or whatever. You know, put a price on something. People will react. The heavy goods vehicles will stop. They will just stop, right? No more heavy goods vehicles. Why? Because you just completely destroy the investment equation for them. And you might go, oh, Stephen, you neoliberal, but it works, right? It genuinely works. It was, and people will be walking. They will be taking public transport. We can have free car parks in the environs of the city. You can densify the city, stop cars coming in, make it much nicer for pedestrians, and you can also make it unique. This is something we've talked about in this podcast at least 3 or 4 times. Limerick City is water at the minute. It's like every other city in the world. Right? It's a bit run down because it didn't get the infrastructural investment that it should have gotten 30, 40, 50 years ago. The facade of Limerick City is the same thing. If you go on images.google.com, put in Limerick City, 19th century, O'Connell Street, you will see exactly the same facade. And the thing about it is, it hasn't been improved.
No.
It's the same one. You know, it's the same one. You go, this is not good. Like, look at O'Connell Street in Dublin. The facade is totally different. The street is totally different. You know, but I firmly believe that like Limerick has done lots of new things. It's been the first to do lots of new things. I firmly believe that if you do these 2 or 3 things, develop the Colbert site, for example, the Cleves site, there's a bunch of other things, you'd have the feeling of the city would be totally different. But now, everybody wins, everybody loses. Somebody wins, somebody loses.
Yeah.
Always. Again, the vision I've described to you is the middle class vision.
Yeah.
The vision where people get charged to come into the city. If you don't have money, that's not great.
Yeah.
You know, it's a vision where people who are already in the city are deeply privileged. So you live 5 minutes away from everything, right? So in the world that I've described, the value of your property is going to triple. So vote for Steve as mayor, right? Like, this is great, right? Or vote for whoever is going to stand for election. I'm not standing for election. Vote. Yeah, I've gotten a few people email me about this. Can I just say, Divinity, I'm not going to be the. Jesus Christ.
Has there been any, sorry, and I really don't want to go off topic because I want to stay in this just very quickly. Has there been any improvement to the role? We talked about the mayoral role.
No, we will come back and do a specific podcast just about this. I have things to report back on that, actually. Okay. I've been talking with Minister Burke about this just one-to-one a few times. So yeah, there's a fair bit to talk about, but not on this one. Okay. What I can tell you is, well, there's another thing that keeps the city small. It's something I think I feel like I can say this, even though I've been here 15 years. It is the phenomenon of the committee. So, and you're smiling and you know exactly what I'm talking about. But if you're listening to this and you don't know what I'm talking about, the way things work in Limerick is, and this is my observation as an outsider, a thing occurs. It doesn't matter what it is. In thing X, a committee is put together to address thing X. It does not matter that there are 5 other committees addressing exactly the same thing. Your 6th committee is now in competition with the other 5, right? And for some reason, none of them like each other. And for some reason, none of them agree that that's the way to go. And because it's a small place and individual personalities can go quite a long way, they fight against each other in kind of an internecine thing, and they never actually coalesce to make something serious happen. If it was up to me, I would stop the creation of committees for 5 years on everything. If you want to do something, the arts or roads or bikes or plants or trees or anything, pick a thing. Somebody is already doing the thing that you care about. I guarantee you, you mightn't go, oh, I'm the only one who can solve the problem of parking. Steve, no. I guarantee you, there's other people. The committee in Limerick, we are our own worst enemy. A group of 3 people working away, looking for resources for the exact same thing as 5 other people. It's maddening. And by the way, can I also just, in addition to sort of like, I don't know why I'm just announcing this, I'm not joining anybody's committee. I'm sorry. I keep getting asked. And the thing of it is, I'll have people who email me and they go, Steve, we're going to do this thing. It's a really nice thing. It's about this cool thing that's very important, and you must join. And I go, yeah, that's good. Have you spoken to the other 3 groups of people who have also asked me to do the thing? And they go, oh yeah, but like we're totally different because we're looking at roads with markings on them as opposed to other kinds of roads.
So with the People's Liberation Front as opposed to
the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front, and you go, look, it's very frustrating. I'm very ranty today, and I don't know why.
It's
I'm
okay.
Very ranty. I'm sorry.
It's good.
You know?
I mean, this is the point. It's
the point
funny.
is not to. People are like, I'm not. People are pulling their earphones out, flicking them across.
Well,
the river.
Can I clarify something that
please
I am a Limerick gal, unlike you, Stephen. No, I'm kidding.
Sadder.
No, I mean, gee, like, what would we if no one ever moved here? We'd be in big trouble. No, and I grew up here, and I've left and I've come back, and I love it. I love Limerick. Despite its best efforts, I love it. And it's just, and I'm someone who also has at times I've run a theater space in town. I've been someone I often am promoting things that are happening, and then I always hear this really annoying comment of, oh, I didn't know that was on, or there's never anything on in Limerick. And I'm like, I don't know what, I can't knock on your door and tell you this is happening. You need to inform yourself, whatever. So I'm if anyone's listening going, this is a great place and there's loads of things happening, these are people who just don't inform themselves. It's not that. It's not remotely that. I very much love this place. I'm very frustrated by it because I spent some time in Galway early in the year, and Galway has, if you actually look at its architecture and its streets, it's quite pokey, it's quite awkward. They don't have a lot of beautiful buildings, but it's got a hell of a vibe, and they you can walk out to the Claddagh and you can get away from cars. Like, you can get from A to B. You could be going somewhere. You're not going for a walk out the country. You're going from one place to another and get away from cars. Whereas in Limerick, no matter where I am, whether I'm on the 3 bridges or on a pedestrian street, even, half of it still, there's always a car at my elbow in Limerick. That's it. I always feel like there's a car at my elbow. There's never any silence. And like, I just get frustrated because my friends who aren't from Limerick come here and they go, God, it's so lovely, and you got these big broad streets and it's really cool, and there's brilliant people here,
Yeah.
But a lot of decision making along the way over the last, certainly in my lifetime, just seems to, there's been stuff that's happened that has, yes, absolutely set things free. But like, even, okay, back to Berlin, you're like, shut up, whatever about Berlin. Of course, it's a capital city. It's, it's got a crazy history in that. But I went for a walk in Tempelhof Park, which up to a number of years ago was an airport. And it was a domestic airport. They had no need for it anymore, so it closed down. And there was this sense, well, what'll we do with it? And the consultation was, well, just leave it. Because it's an airport, is naturally a load of flat space, tons of flat ground with some macadam and that. So it is a perfect park because you've loads of grass and you've loads of kind of runways for skateboarding, biking, rollerblading, And they were like, "Well, do we need to put in like things in the park to make it a park?" And they're like, no, just everyone's like, "No, just leave it alone." So
Yeah.
they blocked off the terminal building. You can't access that. I think it gets open now and again. They just put up a sign like grill area, so you can bring your barbecue. And then, but everything else is just left go. And it's just this
Yeah.
huge space that people have access to. And there isn't a padlock on it. Like in Limerick is a series of locked gates and barriers. And there's this, and I'm getting ranty now, but I adore the People's Park. It's near me. It's one of my favorite. I just think it's incredible resource in the city centre. But there's this really funny tiny part of it, which I feel in some ways is like Limerick in a snapshot. So there's this one little part of the grass which clearly was a little shortcut. People would walk up and down it, a lot between two paths, kind of on a little hill. And it got kind of pathed, like they put a bit of gravel down. And then they cable tied a barrier at the top of it. So they built the path and then blocked it. And that to me, I'll send you a photo. It's inexplicably hilarious. I'm like, build the path and then no, you can't go there. It's just between a tiny point A and a tiny point B, and this cable tied big plastic barrier blocking it. And that to me is the kind of logic of Limerick. We're going to develop this thing, and then actually, no, we're gonna lock that gate, so you can't go to it. Anyway, that's my little rant, which is very much kind of a citizen's rant. It's very much someone in it who, like, there are great ideas, and there's great ideas people come in, but for some reason they get strangled by, as you say, the committees and the.
One thing that there is some good news. So it's been kind of a downer of a podcast.
Yes, but let's go upbeat as we.
There is some positive news, right? So
yes.
So the University of Limerick has bought a site in the city centre. Long awaited. And the site is on Sarsfield Bridge, and it's the old Duns building. And we are going to put what's called a Citizen Innovation Lab in there. What that is it's a big white box with a digital model of the city in it. And the digital model will literally, like, we have a 3D printed model of the city, and we can overlay a different city.
Wow.
Like, you can plan, you can go like, let's rip up O'Connell Street and just rewild the whole thing. Feck it, just get rid of the road and do what they did in South Korea, pull up the road and just give it back to the animals. Like, I mean, there's a significant argument that at certain points of the evening, particularly for Thursday, Friday night, we have given it over to the animals already. But there's there. So there are things where there are new startups that are moving into the city. There are, and I'd be aware of a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of there's a kind of a startup culture happening in the city for the first time.
A what?
Yeah. So like, if you know Dominic Street, where the Dole office is on Dominic Street.
Yeah.
Walk out the front door of that in your mind, turn left, you'll see a thing called the Engine. Right?
Yeah.
There's a brand new building going to be built behind that, a giant one, which is going to be just for startups, for new people, new ideas, new products, new businesses, right? Those people are going to come in, they're going to want nice coffees. If you walk around the city center right now, like today, you will have 5 or 6 places that I'm aware of where you go, oh my God, the coffee is amazing. Like as good as Melbourne, as good as New York, as good as anywhere. And it's delicious. Like, it's really high quality stuff. If you go to, there's a couple of like cool little pop-up shops now, Wickham's Way, for example, on the weekends, like that's there. And all of a sudden you're starting to see these little embers of like cool ideas. There's going to be a place in the city where you can come and workshop an idea. And the idea is it's for citizens. So it's not there at this in the UL space. The idea of a citizen innovation lab is it's not there for some, professor lad to go, blah, 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 here's the answer, peasants. The whole point is that the citizens, when you say, like, I'm coming at it from the perspective of a citizen, the citizens have more of the information about how they'd like the city to change, right? Yeah. And you're also very, very unlikely, if the citizens are the people coming up with the solutions, to come up with a solution that is like typed to big business, for example, or typed to local retailers, or typed to one group or another. If you come at it from a perspective of like democracy, right? And that doesn't mean like you'll have great ideas and everything will be perfect and law work super. But what it does mean is that you start from the citizen, you automatically start from a position of like democratic legitimacy,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think that that's why I'm so attracted to the mayor idea as well. I'm
Yeah.
really, really attracted to the mayor idea because I think something that says I speak for all is very powerful because who has voice matters. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, so there's a lot of positive stuff happening. And I think, one of the things I do want us to do is to be vastly more self-critical, but with a constructive criticism. Because very often you'll go, oh, Joe's the place to kick, and they go, oh, well, yeah, I mean, things could be better. Or they go, Limerick is the greatest place of all time. You know, every, you know, this is the most fantastic place. How fucking dare you say that it's not fabulous? And you're like, it's clearly not fabulous. It's fabulous. Shut up. So there's this continuum of like unreality. I think oftentimes really constructive, sort of like,
Yeah.
if you change these two things, this will be better.
Yeah.
Like literally change the sequencing of the streets so that the bike is privileged over the car,
Yeah.
right? People go, or like let's just make sure that the most polluting vehicles can't get in there, or let's just make sure that the air quality is the highest air quality in the country, or let's make sure that we have one street that's developed that's just designed to produce the best food that we can. Like
Mm.
one of the things we don't talk about and we're very bad at is thinking about the near future. So in 2026, the Ryder Cup is coming,
Yeah.
right? The Ryder Cup. And so we're going to have some of the richest people on earth showing up in Limerick City in 5 years' time. We could get ready for that. We could do interesting things. We could put on our best show, live our best lives, be our best selves. But only if we plan for it, and only if we do something about it,
Will
and
we
only if we decide what we're going to do.
will we set up a committee?
This calls for immediate action. This calls for immediate action. Yeah. Listen, the answer to this is a committee of 3 people who won't talk to anyone.
We won't talk to anyone.
Won't talk to anyone.
The warring committees. Listen, Stephen, that is look, it's great to talk. And as I said, we did not want to be on any downer, but I do think you can sit and give out all day, but no, I'm very much into constructive, like positive solutions, like not just giving out, because we can do that all day. And it's good to get a conversation going. And if you do listen to us, we welcome. You can find us on Twitter at Steve Talk, and that's a Steve with. That's a Steve with a V, obviously, because you don't abbreviate your name with a PH. But
it's actually Steve with an umlaut. So
Steve. But come at us with ideas, absolutely, and committee proposals.
We're not joining any of your committees.
No.
I'm speaking for Anne.
I was on so many.
We are not joining.
I was chair of so many things for Limerick City Culture. I could practically have furnished my house. I did my time.
Yeah.
The best thing that came out of it was the friendships and relationships that got made out of it. But it was Jesus. But no, do come at us with stuff. And obviously, dare I remind you of Stephen's horrendous proposal for a sponsorship of the castle. Well, we now have the Olympia Theatre in Dublin, so the Olympia is now sponsored by 3.
Okay.
So they've put a 3 in front of Olympia. It's still called the Olympia, but
So it's the 3 Olympia Theatre.
Yeah, but I don't think anyone's calling it that. I think everyone's still calling it the Olympia. I
still call it Lansdowne Road. Never mind about your bleeding Aviva. Like, I don't know, whatever. Like,
but the point.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, but
the point. There's dating yourself, right? The point.
Everybody knows we're
point.
43.
Jesus, the point.
Well, what's it at the moment? The O2? Oh, what's it?
Oh, I don't know, but the point, I think we should come up with different names to spot. Yes, yes, yes. Well, obviously, given the day, so we're recording this the day after Facebook and Instagram and all them just all fell apart.
Yes.
I actually don't know why they all stopped. But yeah. Yeah, so maybe we should like get it sponsored by Facebook or something. What do you think?
But then the castle wouldn't work if it fell.
Oh, that's fair.
If
That's fair.
Facebook
That's fair.
dropped
You
the
come in
castle.
and shout your status at the stones, or give
But
it your bank pin or something.
but
That'd be good.
the castle might go offline and stop working as a castle.
Oh, you're not getting in. You're not getting in. You're not getting in anymore. Yeah.
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 But
Yeah.
listen, like we were winding down the episode beautifully, and then I got us all started again. Okay, Stephen, as ever, lovely to chat,
So
and
great to talk.
until next time, I'll see
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Mind yourself.